Hey, hello, and welcome to the studio. We are back talking about the recently released DeliveryX Top 500. So this is the report where we look at the European top 500 retailers and then focus in on the fulfillment, delivery, supply chain, operations, logistics, basically the doing side of multi-channel retail, and how together we convert the marketing promises into a delivery for customers. But of course, it's a more complex world now. We no longer look just at the moment of delivery, but also returns, circular commerce, sustainability, as well as the learnings that we can fold back in. So we're going to go through the report today, just picking out some things we liked. I'm joined in the studio by the one and only Bobbie Ttooulis, who's the Group Marketing Director of GFS. Bobbie, the real you, not a picture.
Yes.
Tell everyone a bit about you and also, of course, about GFS.
Okay, so thank you first of all for inviting me on the webinar today, Ian. As you said, my name's Bobbie Ttooulis. We've already gone through the talk about where does your surname come from, which Ian knows now and is sworn to secrecy.
Sworn to secrecy.
Yeah, keep that to yourself. But anyway, GFS, some of you may have heard of us. We've actually been around since 2001. So we were the UK's first multi-carrier services provider. We're now the largest services provider. We help online retailers and 3PLs essentially simplify multi-carrier management so they can maximize the delivery experience and also operational efficiency, because they still have to achieve both, right? So through us, they get all the benefits of single access to multi-carrier services across the world, across all carriers, but that comes together with GFS technology and our proactive support and expertise as part of the service. So all of that gets boiled down and simplified into the single multi-carrier relationship and one technology integration. So that's us. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you explained that, but it also shows why we partnered on the report, because you have that pan-European, pan-service view that we appreciate. And speaking of the report, everybody who's on the webinar will get a copy of this if you don't have it already. But I'm just sharing now some thumbnails of the report and the chart, and there's an ever so modern QR code there that you can zap, grab, and get a copy of the report. But as I said, don't worry, we will be sending you a link to that if you're listening live to this now. But for people in catch-up, just zap that corner. So, Bobbie, we have a couple of points we've pulled out that I wanted to go through. So I think the best is if we move through some of these, get a view of your thoughts, and we'll take it from there.
Sure.
I think the first thing that has struck us is the change in delivery speed requirements. So if we look at this chart, let me just zoom in a second so that people don't have to squint too much at this. What we can see is country by country, what the expectations are of delivery time. And if you look at the orange, that is the we expect it in 1 to 2 days. So over on the left, we have the Dutch, who are generally quite demanding, want 1 to 2 days. Whereas over in Norway, Finland, and France, the culture seems to be much more accepting of the 3 to 5 days. Now, this is something that's we've been tracking for a while. And if you look at what the retailers are offering, last year we saw a drop in the number of retailers offering next day service. So on the one hand, we hear about prime next day is the new norm, but yet we hear consumers saying, we're not that fussed. and we see the retailers tuning it back. How are you reading, Bobbie, the importance of the service level and the promise, speed, price, consistency? How does that look to you across Europe?
I think that's pretty consistent, but I also think there's a wider view on this. So if the US was on this chart, for them, anything between 3 and 5 days is considered a fast delivery because of the size of the country. You mentioned last year how next day had been taken away, but I think one of the key factors about last year was that we were in lockdown, and in lockdown, I think there was so much demand, this glut of demand for online shopping, so much demand that impacted retailers' stock supplies. It impacted carrier capacity. So that meant that, parcels were delayed if they got there at all. So the consumers were just happy to get their parcel. So they were just happy to get it.
Yes.
Next day wasn't that important because they had nowhere to go. We were all stuck at home.
Exactly.
So that's exactly. So it's not surprising that next day tailed off. I also think that next day is very costly from an operational perspective. So our philosophy and what we see time and time again from consumer behaviors and from retailers that really get this right is they work on the principle of offer the consumer the widest possible choice of delivery options, because what they're looking for is an option which is convenient to them, crucially at that point in time. So fast delivery, next day before 10 o'clock, maybe something I need now because it's my child's birthday tomorrow. So I absolutely must have that. But if I'm in no particular rush, then I'm quite happy with 3 to 5 days. So it really does come back. You can't second guess the consumer's, situation at that point in time. So the best bet is always offer that broad choice.
We do see that there is a national difference. So in countries, I can say like the UK, where we've been brought up on stick a stamp on it, first class post, we get there the next day. Then we've had super competitive urban delivery with enforced guarantees to go ever in the world, ever in the country. So we have very high expectations, whereas some other countries are a bit more. So is it really a case where they are thinking, oh, it's a long way from Rome to Padua, I'll therefore be accepting 5 days? Or is it that the overall competitive level is low, so who needs to go faster? What do you think is behind the difference?
I think there's drivers.
Culture,
I think there's a mix of all those things, Ian, to be honest with you. All the above. Infrastructure, cultural differences. So, for example, in France and the US, the number one preference is click and collect. In the UK, we've always been home delivery bods. So if you look at the research that IMRG do every year, which is the home delivery survey, which goes across 15,000 UK consumers, and that's been running for the past 16 years, the findings from that are always consistent, that the number one delivery preference for UK shoppers, at least, is home delivery. So you could say that's a cultural difference. But I think there's other drivers. Some of it is the industry pushing to sort of, because your customer's only going to go with what you offer them. So if retailers are under the expectation that they've got to compete with Amazon, so there's got to be this prime delivery experience, of course they're going to start trying to do that. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then your consumers get to expect that. But I still think that there are other factors that come into play, regardless of what the cultural, circumstance, what the cultural differences are, or what retailers are pushing to their consumers. And I do think it does come back to, why am I buying this? What's my situation? What delivery option is going to best suit me based on not only my circumstances, but what I want to pay for delivery.
Yes. So we've got a lot of things coming together here. We have a customer who's gone through a process of picking the right color, the right size, the right combinations, building the basket, then assessing delivery with cost versus convenience. There are a lot of things we're asking our customers to do. And at the same time, it does seem as if the retailer is stuck between two opposing drivers. One is we want to match the best in market in case there's an opportunity for us. But the second thing, and this is probably relevant since we're in Tour de France time, I remember listening to an interview with a professional cyclist who was being asked about how fast he'd gone. And he was saying the aim in the Tour de France is to cycle as slow as possible, but just fast enough to beat everyone else. And so it's not to go as fast as you can, it's to just be at the front. So it's odd that we're talking about this, but at the same time, the next thing that's being thrown in is queue delivery, which I just hate this phrase.
I don't even understand what that is. What is that?
I think someone decided it's quick delivery.
Okay.
Let's not use it. It's ultra fast, 15-minute delivery. And, we've been tracking what's happening here. So it's micro delivery and it's very rapid. So we're seeing this, famously with Waitrose and Deliveroo offering their 10-minute delivery. Tesco and Gorillas are teamed up to offer 10 minutes, which they're branding as Tesco Whoosh. And these delivery companies are growing enormously, while at the same time we're seeing the convenience store turnover drop a little. So it's as if the walk into the corner store is being replaced by bring my crisps to me. And I've put a photo up there of a recent podcast we did with Ali from Ali Holmes and PepsiCo. And they were talking about, if you're having a lads' night in, girls' night in, whatever, family night, and you fancy some snacks in front of the telly, then literally as the film downloads, you order your snacks and they deliver to you on the sofa. So sofa surfing and sofa potatoes come together. So we are seeing these in urban areas. Where I live, it's about a 6.5-minute walk from the tube station to my front door. And there's a Gorilla's tent just by the exit of the tube. And they're saying, we challenge you, order now and race us home, where they're saying they'll get home before we will, or your money back. And my son's tried this a few times, just raced back in order to beat the bike. So these services are picking up very seriously. I've done a quick chart here, which I have to update every month or two because everyone keeps buying other people. So you've got the delivery promise from 10 minutes for Getter and Gorillas. Then you've got the mid-market, Jiffy, Kajoo, Zap. And then these incredibly slow, old-fashioned services of a whole, 30 minutes, that's extraordinary. Anyway, GoPuff and Deliveroo, along with the people that they're working with. And I was very skeptical about this, Bobbie. Sometimes we like to ask a hard question. So we did a survey of just over 10,000 consumers as part of our European Grocery Shoppers Report. And we asked them, do you use these quick delivery services? And I was shocked that nearly a quarter of people say they're using them now, and about half of the people say, we're quite interested. So we only have this curmudgeonly group of naysayers who are saying they wouldn't add it into their shopping mix. So how do you view this? Is this something that's going to take over Europe and we'll forget about next day? I will be talking about the next 15 minutes.
I'm not surprised by it, if I'm honest, Ian. I think this is, if you think what happened during COVID, the grocery sector was one of the best performing sectors. across, in terms of industry verticals. And that's not surprising because we all had to buy our groceries, do online shopping, couldn't go into the stores. And I think that those habits of doing your online grocery shop have stuck post-COVID. And we've seen the research, people saying they're going to continue buying online, their grocery shop, that's not going to change. And I think this is an extension of that. And this is where, grocery, and this is pertinent to grocery. You can't see that happening with, say, I don't know, clothing or anything like that, really. So in this sector particularly, I think it's particularly relevant for groceries. And you can see how they're now trying to extend that service offer to try and target those customers, those consumers that have that emergency purchase or that impulse purchase like you talked about. Of ordering popcorn just before the movie starts. So it doesn't surprise me. But I actually think that, again, well, first of all, I hold my hand up in shame and say, yes, I've actually used one of those.
Okay.
But in my defense, it was an emergency purchase. It was 10 o'clock at night. My son decided to tell me what he was going to be cooking the next day in home economics. Of course, I didn't have half the ingredients, so I had to emergency situation. So that was the situation. But I actually think that one thing that may be holding this back from mushrooming even further, one is infrastructure. For this to be able to become a reality, you need to have, supply and demand very close together physically.
Yes.
Right. So it's going to work in dense areas.
Dense urban areas, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, is that sustainability comes into the question, because now we are all becoming far more eco-conscious buyers. So I think people will use these services if they have to, but there'll be some consumers out there who will feel absolutely guilty every time they have to use this, me included.
But then if it turns up on a human-powered vehicle, then there isn't necessarily a carbon impact. It's interesting. I just brought the slide back up, Bobbie, because the bottom line is missing ingredient, and that is the one where people say they're already using it. I thought what was interesting as well was to see the third line down, which is the regular grocery shop. And about a year and a bit ago, we interviewed Chris Conway, digital director at the Co-op, and he said a couple of very, very interesting things. One of them was around their real focus on a basket of food. And he was saying because of the location of their stores, the size of their stores, the communities they serve, that instead of having a Waitrose style 3-trolley full of food that you put into the Range Rover and drive home, it's a more urban thing where you have literally a basket for a day or so of food. But he was also talking about how in store they have flexible rostering for their staff. So if you and I are working in the Co-op, we might be stacking shelves. We filled the shelf, and then we'll be tasked to maybe fill baskets and carrier bags and deliver those to people as well. So I think what we're seeing, as well as the flexibility at the front end, the customer experience, the time from demand to deliver, we're seeing retailers now bring that flexibility way earlier into their operations in order to provide a better and more cost-effective, sustainable service. So all good ideas find their way everywhere.
Yeah, and this again, this all comes back to the central premise that consumers, the main driver behind online shopping is convenience.
Yes,
it all comes back to that.
We've talked about next day. We've now got the human-powered vehicles bringing us our vital snacks within 10 minutes.
Yeah, and the pigeons, carrier pigeons, don't forget those.
I'm sure they'd eat my Doritos, but the other thing. Other snacks are available, I hasten to add. The other thing that we should now look at is collection and how that varies throughout Europe. So you'd see at the top here that the ever so slight majority of top retailers in the UK offer collections, all the way down to Cyprus, which seems to have something against going to the store and picking things up. Perhaps our viewers can tell us why they think that might be.
I can tell you that, Ian.
Oh, go on then. Why is that?
I'm Cypriot. We have long siestas, so the shops are closed for a very long time. So if you do want that missing ingredient, or whatever, click and collect, the shops are going to be closed. Yeah, shops are closed. We're all at the beach.
So in that case, we should correlate that against instant delivery as well. But anyway, so we can see then that the leading markets are focused on collection, and the customer also tells us they want collection as part of their interaction with the retailers. But again, what's interesting about collection is it's easy to say, but relatively difficult to do. So you've got a complex routing, you have to know where the product is, get the product, notify the customer. So the adoption of in-store collection is a non-trivial activity. Is this something that you think the customers want more and more? How important is that click and collect in your view?
Click and collect is pretty much a standard offering now. I think it's a given that when you get to the checkout, one of the options you're going to be offered is click and collect. And so that can be click and collect from store. So I purchased a top from, I don't know, I was going to say Gap, but they don't have any stores anymore. So say Next, and then I want to collect it from the store. That's one option. And of course, you know, what you mentioned about the logistics of doing that, where are the physical goods, where you're going to fulfill that, how you're going to get it to the store for click and collect. That all depends on how that retailer is fulfilling orders, whether it's from store or from their warehouse. But click and collect is not only collect from store, it's also collect from parcel shops. And there is such a huge network now, whether you collect it from your garage, your supermarket, the paper shop round the corner, and there's also lockers. So outside even our local church, there's now a rack of lockers from InPost and Amazon lockers, so you can collect your parcels when you go to Sunday service. It's very prevalent.
If you fancy
or other times.
a quick
yes, yes. So I think what I'm trying to say is that click and collect is probably as common now as home delivery. It's an expectation. And like I mentioned before, in some countries, it's a cultural preference or it's a geographical requirement like America or France. And I actually think that it's going to become even more important as, like I mentioned earlier, consumers become more conscious about trying to reduce carbon emissions. So rather than have something delivered to them, they'd rather pick something up which is on their way to the office or school or whatever. Yeah.
And it's changing as well, the stores. So our local store, quick shout out to 24-hour retail in Islington. You can see the way the physical store has changed. It used to be a standard corner shop, tobacco, vape, greeting cards, that kind of stuff. Vape shop, or fix your screen with a mobile phone. Most of those now are covered up, and you walk in, it's like going into a distribution center with cages full of parcels, returns, collection. So we're seeing that changing the high street. And we also see, for example, in France, a collaboration between big supermarkets and Amazon. So you go to a Leclerc supermarket, and against the walls of the supermarket are piles of Amazon lockers.
Yeah.
Because of course, if you're going to drive there to pick things up, you've got the car. It makes sense as a hub. So there are lots of things happening, and one of the things as well we've started tracking is the growth in customer-to-customer commerce. So the ability now, if you're selling on eBay or any other marketplace, to go to your store and be able to unleash the capabilities of, DPD, Yodel, etc., literally to another customer for very accessible prices with full tracking. I mean, talk about progress. We're all becoming retailers at this rate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good. So we have sold, we have flexed our service levels. We're getting these packages into the customer's hands next to where they live. But we also have the reality of the return path and the fact that products are coming back to us. So let's talk about the experience of returns, because the practicality of returns has been getting easier and easier and easier. However, the experience the customer gets is quite important. So in the UK, if you have a bad service, then you're cross, but you're more likely to shop again than if you insult a French person who's basically going to hold a grudge and not use you again. So again, differences by country, but could you reflect maybe on the importance of the returns experience to the customer and what we can do to make that better?
I think that it's true to say that what we've seen over the last, say, 15 years is that retailers, ops managers, within those businesses have put a lot of focus on trying to improve the delivery experience. And a term that I heard when I first came into this industry, and it stuck with me, and I'll share with you here, is that delivery started as a logistics problem, and same thing for returns. Started as a logistics problem. Now it's more of a marketing problem, a customer experience problem. So over the past 10, 15 years, retailers have really upped their game around delivery and offering customers a best-in-class delivery experience, which is choice and convenience, like we mentioned before. And that's come a long way. Now the focus has to be turned to returns. And in the last few years, we've seen how, with the evolution of online returns, fast, quick, painless returns, how that's really evolved. And there's a lot of focus now on trying to improve the returns experience for consumers. And whilst delivery has come a long way, returns still has a lot further to go to catch up. And the reason why this matters is that we know from experience and from research tells us that when your customer gets to the checkout, there are some very important reasons why they're going to decide not to press the buy button, why they would abandon their cart at that point in time. Delivery and returns is probably the second highest factor after cost of what they've got in their basket. And research shows that when they get to the checkout, 68% will abandon their purchase if they don't see the delivery option, which is convenient for them. But just as high, I think, is over 50% will abandon their purchase if, when they look and check your returns policy, again, they don't feel that it's going to be easy or convenient for them to return goods.
Yeah. And we see this as well with interaction with buy now, pay later, where it's getting ever easier to buy, but you want then to be able to return, get your money back, which the BNPL facilitates, but you also have to look at the process, how quick it's all going to be.
Exactly.
So the customer, I think every time we offer a service, they get more savvy in terms of brokering the various parts together. So returns, super important. And again, big variation throughout Europe, because of course, there are different cultures, different legislations, and it also varies a lot by category of goods sold. So definitely have a look in the report at that.
Yes.
Let's have a think then, as time ticks on, about any people that you would like to give a shout out to who are really getting the whole deliver, return, cyclical experience right. I mean, in the report, it's chock full of case studies, and it'll be no surprise, for example, to see Amazon there, who bit by bit are, if you like, setting customer expectation at what the high level is in terms of predictable, cost-effective delivery experience and an exemplary return or replacement experience we needed as well. But also then seeing some premium players like Dubai and Corf, who aren't just competing on the Amazon Prime front, but really looking to bring a new experience that fits with their product lines in terms of collect in store, try on, return, and so on, as well as others who are looking at sustainability as an important differentiator. So is there anybody that you wanted to pull out, Bobbie, that you would say, oh, they're doing a good job? Tip of the hat to anybody?
I've got to be careful here because I think all our customers are doing a good job. Okay, so if I haven't mentioned you, dear GFS customers, it's not because we don't love you, it's we do. But you asked me a question. So first of all, I would say across the board, those businesses, those retailers that get it right are the ones that keep to the simple principle of give your customers as many delivery options as possible at point of checkout. Same thing applies to returns. When it comes to returns, make it as seamless, as quick as possible for your customer. And what matters to them most is knowing when they're going to get their money back. That's what matters to them most. Okay, so there's some core principles there. I think the ones that I would call out, first off, I would say Wilko's. So Wilko's is one of our largest customers. And the reason why I'm calling them out is because they have such a complex and huge catalogue of products.
They sell everything.
Shape, size, weight, dimensions. Some are hazardous, gas bottle, whatever it is, liquids. They've got such a complex range. And they've managed to crack delivery, right, by being able to, leverage the right technology and the right multi-carrier services in order to really make that as slick as possible for their customers. So on the one hand, being able to balance the operational pressures, the cost pressures, because you're still managing your bottom line. As an operations manager, you still have to satisfy all those KPIs, speed, and accuracy, and fulfillment.
Price proposition
and
is
your price,
a very low one, so there's no money to waste there.
Exactly. And then on the other side, they completely understand that brand loyalty is, can be quite fragile at times. That really what your online customer is looking for is convenience. So that's speed, not the speed, but the convenience of delivery. The whole delivery experience is really vital. And they manage to pull that off, and they do that very well. So,
okay, right. I'm going to stop you there in the interest of time. Other clients will just have to write to you separately and ask how they didn't make the cut. Just before we round off, one of the themes that's been coming through every aspect of the report is the question of sustainability. And we asked through our European Observatory, we asked customers, would you be willing to spend €3 extra in order to have a more eco-friendly delivery? And the Italians came out on top, where 35% of the people said, I'll pay €3 more. And the least willing, with only 16%, were the Poles and the Finns, who weren't too pleased to pay more at all. But overall, everybody wanted more sustainable options. They just weren't convinced they wanted to pay for them. So behind the scenes, Bobbie, is sustainability something that you're being quizzed on by retailers and brands looking to improve the sustainability without increasing the price?
Absolutely. So yes is the short answer to that. And yes, we are seeing the increase, there's a lot more inquiries and demand for sustainable services. There have been some practical reasons for why that hasn't, supply hasn't caught up with demand yet. So if you can imagine the demand and cost of electric vehicles, for our carriers to tool up and skill up for electric vehicles is high. At the moment, there are parts of the country where some postcodes where you can offer it, some postcodes where you can't. Yes. But I think, eventually that will all catch up and it'll be widely available. So it is very important. But again, it should be part of retailers' overall delivery proposition. It should be one of the options that you offer, so that if your customer, that particular individual customer, it's important to them, they're not going to walk away at that point. They're not going to abandon their cart.
But again, one of the things you're hinting at is that it's going to change the checkout. So now, instead of going to a retailer and thinking it just says a vanilla get it next day, it might be enter a postcode, and then it's tailored. You can have it by electric vehicle, you can have it in 3 days from a locker. So it's trying to get that balance of customer data, real-time updates, and the services available.
Yeah. And technology. This is where the technology comes into it. So, you know, what you've just described is, can be done with technology by looking at what's in the basket, where is that consumer base physically. So based on that, based on those rules, what delivery options are the smart options to offer? Yeah.
Well, look, on that note, we've come to the end of our time, but I think you've set us up for the ongoing reality, which is that the more we can do, the more we need to be able to present it seamlessly and fluidly to the customer in real time. So that's a good place to leave things. Now, Bobbie, I'm not sure if I mentioned that we have a report. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. This time round, I've made the QR code even bigger, because people will now be grabbing their phones, desperate to snap it and download it. So do remember, you can get the report in all its glory, with country-by-country analysis, sectoral analysis, and again, some trend pieces by our editors and analysts. It's all available free of charge. So let no one say that Christmas hasn't come early. Do get your hands on that, and we update it throughout the year. So if you visit DeliveryX.net, then you'll have ongoing updates and analysis of developments in this most exciting part of multi-channel retail. And thank you, Bobbie, for joining me in the studio and bringing some of that excitement to life. It's been great chatting with you. Look forward to picking up again in our next webinar. But until then, if anyone's got any questions that you're thinking, I can't wait, I need to know now, drop us a note. research@retailx.net, and we'll get back to you, hopefully, with the answer you seek. Anyway, for now, it's goodbye from the studio.